There was a sound coming out of a black kitchen on a Sunday morning in 1962 that you will never hear again. It was the sound of a cast-iron skillet hitting a gas burner at 6 in the morning, the hiss of bacon grease meeting flour, the low hum of a woman who had been awake since before the rooster, singing a hymn she'd known since she was 8 years old. It was the sound of a family being built one dish at a time. There was no microwave. There was no shortcut. There was no Sunday brunch with avocado toast and a mimosa. There was Big Mama, an apron tied twice around her waist, a wooden spoon in her hand, and a pot of something on every eye of that stove. And by the time the family got home from church, that house didn't smell like a house anymore. It smelled like heaven had moved in for the afternoon. Now folks today, they don't know what that was. They've never sat at a table where 4 generations were passing the same bowl of greens. They've never heard a grandmother say grace so long the gravy got cold. And that, family, is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Hey family, I'm James. And today we're going back, way back, to the soul food Sunday dinners that every black mama, every big mama, every auntie in the kitchen knew how to put on the table in the 1960s. We're talking about 25 dishes that built our families, 25 plates that fed our bodies and saved our souls. Now before we get into it, if this is your first time here on Forgotten Black Memories, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of folks who remember, and folks who want to remember. Folks who refuse to let these memories die. So go on, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and pull up a chair right next to me. Let's get into it. Number 1. We start where every Sunday started, with the smothered chicken. Now I'm not talking about that fried chicken folks line up for at the gas station. I'm talking about smothered chicken. Big Mama would take a whole bird, cut it down at the joints with a knife so old, the handle had been wrapped in electrical tape twice. She'd dredge those pieces in flour seasoned with salt, black pepper, paprika, and a little something she never told anybody about. Then into the cast-iron skillet, brown on both sides, set aside. Then she'd build the gravy in that same pan. Onions, a little garlic if she had it. Flour stirred into the drippings until it turned the color of pecan shells. And then chicken broth poured in slow while she stirred with her left hand. The chicken went back in, the lid went on, and that pan sat on a low fire for an hour and a half. By the time she pulled it off, the meat was falling off the bone, the gravy was thick enough to hold a spoon up, and the smell had walked itself all the way down the block. Folks don't make chicken like that anymore. They don't have the time. They don't have the patience. And that's a shame. Number 2. Collard greens, and I don't mean the bagged-up, pre-washed, cut-up kind from the grocery store. I mean greens that came out of somebody's garden or off the back of a pickup truck driven by a man named Mr. Charlie who came around every Saturday. Big Mama would take those greens to the kitchen sink and wash them 3 times. 3 times, family, because grit don't play. Then she'd stack the leaves, roll them like a cigar, and ribbon cut them with a paring knife. Into the pot they went, on top of a smoked ham hock that had already been simmering for 2 hours. Add a splash of vinegar, a pinch of sugar, a dash of red pepper flakes, and let those greens cook down for another 2 hours, until they were almost black, and the pot liquor at the bottom was the most valuable thing in the kitchen. We used to fight over that pot liquor, family. We'd sop it up with cornbread and call it a meal by itself. You won't see that today. Today they sauté kale for 90 seconds and call it Southern food. Child, please. Number 3. The cornbread. Now this is where I have to draw a line in the sand. Sunday cornbread in a black household in the 1960s was not sweet. I say it again, it was not sweet. That sugar cake mess they sell now? That's not cornbread. That's dessert pretending to be a side dish. Big Mama's cornbread was made in a cast-iron skillet that had been seasoned by her mother and her mother's mother. She'd heat that skillet in the oven with a spoonful of bacon grease in it until it was smoking. Then she'd pour in a batter of yellow cornmeal, buttermilk, an egg, baking powder, salt, and just enough flour to hold it together. When that batter hit the hot grease, it sizzled like the 4th of July. 20 minutes later, out came a wheel of cornbread the color of a copper penny on the bottom, golden on top, and the crust crunched when you cut into it. We ate it crumbled into a glass of buttermilk in the evening. We ate it broken up in our greens at dinner. That was just how it was done. Number 4. Black-eyed peas with rice, what folks down in the Carolinas called Hoppin' John, but in most black households it didn't need a fancy name. It was just peas and rice. Big Mama would soak those peas overnight in a mason jar of cold water. Sunday morning, into the pot they went with a smoked turkey neck or a piece of salt pork, an onion cut in half, a bay leaf, and enough water to cover. They simmered all morning. Around noon, she'd cook a pot of long-grain white rice, fluff it with a fork, and serve those peas spooned right over the top with a little of the liquor running down. There was something about that combination. The soft starch of the rice, the earthy weight of the peas, the smoky fat from the meat, that fed something deeper than hunger. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week loading freight, and he never once complained, but he'd say a plate of peas and rice on a Sunday could fix anything that happened to him on a Tuesday. Number 5. Candied yams. And let me clear something up right now. These were not sweet potatoes from a can with marshmallows on top. That's a casserole. We're talking about real candied yams. Big Mama would buy 6 or 7 big orange-fleshed yams from the produce stand, peel them with a paring knife, and slice them into thick rounds. Into a heavy pot they went with a stick of real butter, a cup of brown sugar, a half cup of white sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of nutmeg, a splash of vanilla, and a little water. Then she'd put a lid on it and let it cook low and slow until those yams turned into glazed coins of pure gold, sitting in a syrup so thick it'd coat the back of a spoon. We'd sneak into the kitchen between church and dinner and try to steal one, and she'd swat us with a dish towel without even turning around. She always knew. Mamas always knew. Number 6. Macaroni and cheese. And here I have to slow down, family, because Sunday mac and cheese is sacred ground. This was not the orange powder in a blue box. This was a baked dish made from scratch that took 2 hours and used 4 kinds of cheese. Big Mama would boil her elbow macaroni in salted water, drain it, and pour it into a buttered casserole dish. Then she'd build the custard. Eggs whisked with evaporated milk, a little regular milk, salt, pepper, a pinch of dry mustard if she was feeling fancy. She'd shred sharp cheddar, mild cheddar, a block of Velveeta, and sometimes a little Colby. She'd layer it, pasta, cheese, custard, and top it with another fistful of shredded cheese and a few dots of butter. 45 minutes in the oven, and out came a mac and cheese with a brown, bubbly crust on top, strings of cheese pulling 6 inches off the spoon, and a custardy bottom that hugged every piece of pasta. That was the dish you fought for seconds on. That was the dish the cousins came over for. This, right here. This is something we need to bring back. Number 7. Fried okra. Now I know some of you young folks turn your nose up at okra. You've only had it slimy. You've never had it the way Big Mama made it. She'd take fresh okra pods, slice them into half-inch rounds, and toss them in a bowl with buttermilk. Then she'd drain them and roll them in yellow cornmeal seasoned with salt and a little cayenne. Into a cast-iron skillet of hot bacon grease they went. And I said bacon grease, family, because that's what was in the coffee can on the back of every stove in the 1960s. She'd fry those okra rounds until they were crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and not one bit slimy. We'd eat them by the handful like popcorn, standing at the counter, burning our fingers because we couldn't wait. Now, Big Mama, she used to say, if your okra is slimy, you cooked it wrong. Don't blame the okra. Number 8. Smothered pork chops. Sunday was a meat day, family. Sometimes it was chicken, sometimes it was a roast, but in plenty of households, it was smothered pork chops. Big Mama would buy bone-in chops thick enough to stand up on their own. She'd season them the night before. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, a little onion powder, and let them sit in the icebox covered with wax paper. Sunday morning, she'd dredge them in flour, brown them hard in a skillet of hot oil, and then build a gravy in the same pan with sliced yellow onions and a quart of beef broth. Back in went the chops, on went the lid, and that pan sat on a low fire for an hour. The onions melted into the gravy. The pork got so tender you barely needed a knife. We'd ladle that gravy over white rice and mop up what was left with cornbread. There was nothing on God's earth as good as a smothered pork chop on a Sunday afternoon in 1965. Number 9. Potato salad. And now we're at one of the most controversial dishes on the table because every family had their own recipe and every grandmother thought hers was the only right way. Big Mama would boil her potatoes whole in their skins so they didn't get waterlogged. She'd boil eggs in the same pot. While that cooled, she'd dice celery and yellow onion fine, because nobody wanted a big chunk of onion in their mouth. Then she'd peel and cube the potatoes, chop the eggs, and bring it all together in a bowl with mayonnaise. Duke's if she could get it, Hellman's if she couldn't. A heavy spoonful of yellow mustard, sweet pickle relish, salt, pepper, and a dust of paprika across the top for color. She'd cover it with plastic wrap, set it in the icebox, and tell us not to touch it until dinner. It got better the longer it sat, and it sat right next to the macaroni and cheese on the table like two old friends. Now, before we keep going, I want to hear from you, family. I want you to think about your own Big Mama's Sunday table. Close your eyes for a second and ask yourself this. What was the one dish on her Sunday table that you have never, in all your years, been able to recreate? The one that died with her recipe book? The one you've tried 6 times and it still don't taste right? Drop the name of that dish in the comments below. Tell me whose kitchen it came out of. Tell me your name if you remember it. I read every single comment, family, and I bet you there's somebody else out there whose grandmother made it the exact same way. Let's give these women their flowers while we still got the chance. Number 10. Oxtails. Now, oxtails today cost what a whole brisket used to cost, but back in those days the butcher would just about give them to you. Big Mama would buy a pile of oxtails wrapped in white butcher paper, take them home, and rinse them in cold water with a splash of vinegar. Then she'd flour and brown them in a Dutch oven, set them aside, and saute yellow onions, garlic, and a couple of bell peppers in the drippings. Back in went the oxtails with beef broth, a couple of bay leaves, salt, pepper, a sprig of thyme if her sister had brought some over, and a glug of red wine if there was any in the house. Lid on. Low fire. 3 hours, sometimes 4. When she pulled it off, the meat was sliding off the bone, the gravy was the color of dark chocolate, and the marrow inside those bones was the best secret on the table. We served it over rice with butter beans on the side. That was Sunday royalty. Number 11. Butter beans. And these were not the lima beans from a can. These were big, flat, creamy butter beans, fresh or dried, cooked down for hours with a smoked piece of pork. Big Mama would put them on early in the morning with a ham bone left over from the week before, an onion, salt, pepper, and water. By the time dinner came around, the beans had given up all their starch and made their own gravy in the pot. We'd spoon them next to the rice, and the cousins would fight over the ham bone for the meat still clinging to it. There was a kind of poverty alchemy at work in that pot, family. A ham bone that had already served its purpose got a second life. A handful of dried beans turned into a meal that could feed 8 people. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered, and Big Mama's butter beans were proof of it. Number 12. The Sunday pot roast. In some households, the meat at the center of the table wasn't chicken or pork. It was a chuck roast that Big Mama had been planning since Friday. She'd salt and pepper it heavy, brown it on all 4 sides in a Dutch oven, then nestle it in with potatoes cut in big chunks, carrots in 2-inch logs, yellow onions in wedges, and a couple of celery stalks, a can of beef broth, a sprinkle of dried rosemary, and into the oven it went at 300 degrees for 4 hours. The smell of that roast filled the house in a way nothing else did. When she pulled it out, the meat shredded with a fork. The carrots were sweet, the potatoes were soft enough to mash with your tongue, and the gravy at the bottom of the pot was darker than coffee. She'd slice it on a wooden board, fan the meat out on a platter, and pile the vegetables around it. That platter coming to the table was a moment. Family. Folks stopped talking. Number 13. Chicken and dumplings. Now this was a comfort dish, a weather dish. You made it when the cold came in or when somebody in the house was feeling low. Big Mama would simmer a whole hen with celery, onion, carrot, salt, and pepper for 2 hours until the meat fell off the bone. Then she'd pull the chicken out, strain the broth, and mix flour with a little of that broth and an egg to make a dough. She'd roll the dough out thin on a floured board and cut it into squares with a butter knife. Those squares went into the simmering broth one at a time and turned into pillowy dumplings the size of a domino. Back in went the shredded chicken, a glug of evaporated milk to make it creamy, and she'd let it bubble for another 15 minutes. We'd eat it out of deep bowls with a spoon, and the steam coming up off it would fog your glasses. That was love in a bowl. Number 14. Salmon croquettes. Now this might surprise some of the young folks, but salmon croquettes were a Sunday staple in plenty of black households in the 60s. Big Mama would open up a can of pink salmon, the kind with the little bones and the silver skin, because that's where the calcium was, she said. She'd flake it into a bowl, pick out the bigger bones, and mix it with finely diced onion, an egg, a couple of crushed saltines, salt, pepper, and a dash of hot sauce. She'd shape them into patties about the size of a hockey puck and fry them in a shallow pool of oil until they were golden brown on both sides. We'd eat them with grits in the morning or with rice and gravy at dinner. A can of salmon cost 29 cents back then, and Big Mama could turn it into a meal that tasted like $1,000,000. That was the magic, family. That was the magic. Number 15. Neck bones with rice. Now, some folks won't even talk about neck bones today, like they're embarrassed of them, and that hurts my heart. Neck bones were a Sunday treasure. Big Mama would buy a heavy package of pork neck bones, rinse them, and put them in a pot with onion, garlic, bay leaves, salt, pepper, and a splash of vinegar. They simmered for 3 hours until the meat between those bones surrendered itself. The broth turned silky from the collagen. You'd spoon those neck bones over white rice, suck the meat off the bone with your fingers, because forks were a suggestion, not a rule, and use the pot liquor like a gravy. My uncle used to say a plate of neck bones could humble a grown man. He was right. There was nothing fancy about that dish, but there was everything honest about it. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame. Number 16. Stewed cabbage. Some folks called it smothered cabbage, some folks called it fried cabbage, but in our house it was stewed cabbage. Big Mama would take a head of green cabbage, cut out the core, and chop the leaves into wide ribbons. Into a heavy pot they went with a few strips of bacon already crisped up, the bacon grease, a sliced onion, salt, pepper, a pinch of sugar, and a splash of apple cider vinegar. Lid on. Low fire. 45 minutes. The cabbage cooked down to about a quarter of its original size, but every bite carried the smoke of that bacon and the sweetness of the onion. It went on the table next to the meat and the rice as a side that didn't ask for attention but earned it anyway. Cabbage was cheap. Cabbage was humble. But Big Mama could make cabbage taste like something a king would eat. Number 17. Fried catfish. In black households across the South, sometimes Sunday dinner wasn't church meat at all. It was fish. And the fish was catfish. Big Mama or one of the uncles would have been down at the river on Saturday with a cane pole and a can of worms. They'd come home with a stringer of catfish, clean them on a newspaper out by the back fence, and bring the fillets to Big Mama's kitchen. She'd soak them in buttermilk for an hour, dredge them in seasoned yellow cornmeal, and fry them in a deep cast-iron skillet of hot oil until they were the color of a paper bag and the cornmeal crunched between your teeth. We ate them with hush puppies, coleslaw, and a slice of white bread to catch the grease. Sunday fish was a celebration of the river. Family. It was a reminder that God put food in the water for us, and all we had to do was go get it. Number 18. Hot water cornbread. Some Sundays Big Mama didn't make a pan of cornbread. She made hot water cornbread cakes, and that was a different animal entirely. She'd take yellow cornmeal, salt, and a little sugar in a bowl, pour boiling water over it, and stir it into a thick paste with a wooden spoon. Then she'd scoop palmfuls of that paste, pat them flat like little hamburger patties, and fry them in hot bacon grease in the cast-iron skillet. The outside got crispy and dark. The inside stayed soft and steaming. We'd eat them with greens, with beans, with anything that had pot liquor, because hot water cornbread was a sponge designed by God to soak up the flavor of everything else on the plate. You won't see that today. Folks have forgotten that you can make bread with 2 ingredients and a hot stove. That was just how it was done. Number 19. Chitterlings. Now I know, family, I know. Half of you just made a face, but we cannot do a video about Sunday dinner in the 1960s and skip the chitterlings. Chitterlings, chitlins, however you say it in your house, were a Sunday tradition, especially around the holidays. Big Mama would spend hours cleaning them. Hours, family. She'd sit on a stool by the sink and pull membranes and rinse and rinse and rinse, sometimes with vinegar in the water, sometimes with salt. Then they went into a pot with onion, garlic, bay leaves, vinegar, salt, pepper, and red pepper flakes, and they simmered for 4 hours. The smell, and I'll be honest with you, the smell was strong. Big Mama would crack a window. But when they hit the plate, served with hot sauce and a side of cornbread, they were tender, rich, and a connection to a tradition that went back further than any of us could trace. Chitlins were a refusal to waste. Family. They were our ancestors saying, "We will take what was thrown away, and we will make it a feast." Number 20. Red rice. Down in the Low Country, in the Carolinas and parts of Georgia, Sunday wasn't Sunday without a pot of red rice. Big Mama would render some bacon, sauté onion, bell pepper, and celery in the fat, what folks called the Holy Trinity. Then stir in long grain rice until it was coated. She'd pour in a can of crushed tomatoes, a little broth, salt, pepper, and a few shakes of hot sauce. She might throw in a few pieces of smoked sausage cut into coins. Lid on, low fire, 20 minutes. When she lifted that lid, the rice was the color of brick, every grain separate, the tomato singing through every bite. It went on the table next to fried chicken and collards, and folks who'd grown up on it would put on a second helping without even asking. Red rice was a geography. It told you where somebody's people came from before they ever opened their mouth. Number 21. Sweet potato pie. We're moving into dessert now, family, and we're starting with the one that matters most. I don't want to hear a word about pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie is what other folks eat. We eat sweet potato pie. Big Mama would bake whole sweet potatoes in the oven until they were soft enough to squeeze, peel them while they were still warm, and mash them in a bowl with butter, brown sugar, white sugar, evaporated milk, eggs, vanilla, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a pinch of salt. She'd whisk it smooth and pour it into a pie shell she'd made by hand with flour, lard, and ice water. Into the oven for an hour. When that pie came out, the top had cracked just slightly. The filling had set into a custard that was somewhere between cake and pudding, and the crust was flaky enough to shatter under a fork. We ate it room temperature, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream from the half-gallon box. There's not a sweet potato pie made today that can touch the one Big Mama made in 1964. You can quote me on that. Number 22. Peach cobbler. Now in the summer months, when the peaches were coming off the trees in Georgia and the Carolinas, Big Mama would make peach cobbler. She'd peel and slice fresh peaches into a bowl, toss them with sugar, lemon juice, a little cornstarch, cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg. She'd pour them into a buttered baking dish, dot the top with butter, and lay strips of homemade pastry over them in a lattice. Into a hot oven for 45 minutes. When she pulled it out, the peach juice had bubbled up through the lattice and caramelized at the edges. The crust was golden. The peaches were soft and saucy. We ate it warm with a scoop of vanilla ice cream that melted into the syrup and made a puddle on the plate. The smell of that cobbler in the kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in August. Family, I can close my eyes right now and put myself back there. You won't see that today. Number 23. Banana pudding, and not the cold, layered, instant pudding kind from the deli case. We're talking about real banana pudding, made the old way. Big Mama would cook a custard on the stovetop. Egg yolks, sugar, cornstarch, milk, vanilla, stirring it with a wooden spoon over a low fire until it coated the back of the spoon. Then she'd layer it in a casserole dish with Nilla wafers and sliced ripe bananas, building it up in 3 layers. She'd whip the egg whites with sugar into a meringue, spread it across the top in peaks, and slide it under the broiler until the peaks turned golden brown. We'd eat it warm on Sunday night, and the leftovers, if there were any, got eaten cold straight out of the dish standing in front of the icebox at midnight. Big Mama, she used to say, a banana pudding tells the truth about a cook. And she told the truth every time. Number 24. Pound cake. Now Big Mama's pound cake was a piece of architecture, family. It wasn't just a dessert. It was a statement. She'd cream a pound of real butter with 3 cups of sugar in a big mixing bowl, beat it with a hand mixer until it turned almost white, then add 5 eggs one at a time. In went 3 cups of flour, sifted 3 times, a cup of buttermilk, vanilla, a touch of almond extract, and a pinch of salt. She poured the batter into a bundt pan she'd greased and floured with the care of a surgeon, and into a slow oven it went for an hour and a half. When she pulled that cake out, the smell would walk you backwards. She'd let it cool on the counter under a clean dish towel, and when she turned it out onto a cake plate, it stood there tall and golden like a monument. We ate it plain. We ate it with strawberries in the summer. We ate it with coffee on Monday morning. A slice of pound cake was a quiet, dignified thing, and so was Big Mama, and that's why the cake tasted like her. Number 25. And family, I saved this one for last on purpose. Number 25 is not a dish. Number 25 is the grace. Before anybody picked up a fork, before anybody passed the rolls, before the children stopped wiggling, Granddaddy or the oldest uncle would clear his throat at the head of the table. Every head bowed. Every hand reached out to the hand next to it, and he would pray. He would thank God for the food. He would thank God for the hands that prepared it. He would name the family members who couldn't be there that day. He would ask blessings on the sick and the traveling. He would sometimes go on so long the gravy got cold, and the children opened one eye to peek. But nobody complained. Because that prayer was the seasoning that no spice in the cabinet could provide. That prayer was the thing that made it Sunday dinner instead of just dinner. And when he said amen, the whole table said amen back, and the meal began. That prayer, family. That prayer is what we lost. That prayer is what we have to bring back. So that's 25, family. 25 plates from a Sunday table in a black household in the 1960s. But you understand me, don't you, that the food was never just the food. The food was the excuse. The food was the gathering point. The real Sunday dinner was the 4 generations sitting around a table with mismatched chairs because there weren't enough matching ones. The real Sunday dinner was the uncle telling the same story he'd told for 15 years, and everybody laughing at the same part anyway. The real Sunday dinner was Big Mama refusing to sit down until everybody had been served twice. The real Sunday dinner was the children sent to the kitchen to wash the dishes by hand, while the grown folks moved to the porch for coffee and conversation. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered. We had each other, gathered in one room on one day a week, around one table, with one prayer holding the whole thing together. Now, folks today, they eat in their cars. They eat in front of the television. They eat standing over the counter. And the Sunday dinner has become a Sunday brunch with strangers in a restaurant where nobody knows your name. That's not a meal, family. That's a transaction. So here's what I want from you. Pick one of these dishes, just one, and make it this Sunday. Call your grandkids. Call your nieces. Call somebody you haven't seen in a while. Put it on the table. Say the grace. And let that smell walk down the block one more time. Because as long as somebody is still making smothered chicken on a Sunday morning, we haven't lost it yet. I'll see you next time, family.